committee's consideration on private members' motion 98 of 2019. I'm sorry, yes, that is to do with the closure of branch libraries and a commencement of discussion on that. And first of all, the presentations invited on motion 61 of 2018 regarding reform of the law in relation to abortion. We will take that first, and then afterwards the committee will consider the other matter and a number of other procedural issues that we have to deal with. Is that acceptable? Good. Members of Eve for Life, Ms. Rose, the Partnership for Women's Health and Well-Being, and Mrs. Deborah Ofudile, have I got it right, are all welcome. And we invite you to each make your presentation. You will be limited to 15 minutes each, after which the committee members will be at liberty to ask any questions or seek any clarifications that they wish. You may be assured that all that you say, all the documentation that you have given to us will be taken into full consideration in our own deliberations and in the presentation, the preparation and presentation to the House of Parliament, House of Representatives, our report. I should let you know that we have apologies for Mrs. Marissa Dalrymple Philibert, the Member of Parliament for South Trelawney, and Dr. Fenton Ferguson, the Member of Parliament for Easton St. Thomas. Mr. Philip Paulwell, the Member of Parliament for East Kingston and Port Royal, also apologizes. The order we have here is to begin with Eve for Life. And who will be the spokesperson? Mrs. Crawford, thank you. Welcome again. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Chairman Reverend Thwaites. I thank the other members, MP Cobberfin and MP Stewart, for having us lend our voice to this conversation. Today I represent E for Life, and what we want to do is really just lend our voice to the conversation as it concerns the reform of the abortion law. We don't see our contribution as presenting arguments to, for, or against. Definitely we are not presenting data analysis. We choose not to do moral posturing. This definitely is not an academic research, and definitely not a partisan approach to an issue that's very, very, very important to our community. It's simply a conversation of voices, heartfelt pleas of a group of Jamaican citizens who continue to be left behind. This is one space that we would like to consider this group of Jamaicans, so that they can also say that Jamaica is a place where they can choose to live, work, raise families, and do business. E for Life understands that a wholesale packaging, one-size-fits-all of the abortion law would definitely not serve equitably any one aim or objective. We also understand that the risk of wanton reckless use of the law definitely is not what we want. However, we're asking you to consider some of the women that we represent. I personally, at age 7, had my first sexual experience. Though biologically I was not able to get pregnant, the male was definitely capable of fathering a child. Today I carry questions and concerns of over 100 Jamaican girls that we serve across this country. Many have tried to love their child through years of mental and emotional disorder, and an equal number nurture hate anger, resentment towards the child. This morning I had the difficult conversation with 4 of these women, and I just want to share quickly what they had to say. The first young woman says that, how do I tell my 9-year-old daughter that her father is her uncle, since I was raped by my mother's brother? When I realized I was pregnant, I felt lost. I wondered, my cousin told me I was no longer pregnant. In spite of all of that, I am glad I did the abortion. She says, when a woman carries a child for a rapist, there is guilt that you have chosen to burden the child with, and the other words I could repeat in this space, shame to answer the child and society about the father. Abortion, safe or unsafe, is my better option. The last one said to me this morning, I was raped by my stepfather at age 8. From him I got HIV. I was raped again at age 14. From that man I got my daughter. Looking back now, I may be mentally ill if I did not have the abortion. The grandmother of my daughter took me to a doctor. The process was not done properly. I went to put in a family planning, and I ended up in hospital for 2 weeks. Even with that, I'm still glad I did it, because I couldn't manage 2 children at that age. These are just some of the voices of the women that we serve. So we have asked 7 things of this committee. The first one is to consider the voices of young women who face rape, gender-based violence, trafficking, and many other sexual crimes, crimes that result in pregnancy, crimes that often go unreported, unpunished. However, they are forced to carry the babies of perpetrators. The woman or the girl have nothing as time on her side to wait. She has a maximum of 12 weeks to decide. Currently, her only options are safe, illegal, unsafe abortions, fear of going to hell, biological safe pregnancies, yes, but with mental disorder for her lifetime. Under the current law, in order for her to be an upstanding, moral, law-abiding citizen, she must bear her crime child. Secondly, we call on this committee to consider approving access to legal regulatory services for terminating a pregnancy when necessary. We understand that there are spaces and there are criteria for safe abortions on request of the woman or a medical practitioner. The unregulated, unsafe, clandestine abortion services continue to thrive in Jamaica, and we punish our women who are exposed to them, and as they expose themselves to further harm. When we adjust this law, we will ensure that no one is punished for providing safe abortions within regulatory boundaries. We'll ensure that these abortions are not punished from the woman's perspective, that no one is policing or investigating or prosecuting safe abortions. Abortion is treated like every other form of health care that is using best practice services to deliver, using trained providers, and of course developing and applying evidence-based guidelines and applying existing laws to deal with the dangerous, negligent practices. Thirdly, we're asking you to consider that all relevant stakeholders promote and prioritize health, mental, physical care, protection of our women and our girls who are impacted by rape and gender-based violence and trafficking. One psychiatrist, Dr. J. Bray, purported that her concern is the adverse impact of mental health of the women who actually carry the pregnancies versus those who have had an abortion. Interestingly enough, one of the young women in my program that I spoke to, she said that was definitely her situation. She felt that the harm, the horrors of carrying a pregnancy was greater than not doing so. Fourthly, we've asked this committee to uphold the human and child rights, to make sure that our citizens participate in healthy sexual choices. World Health Organization defines reproductive right as the recognition of the basic rights of all couples and individuals to decide freely and responsibly the number, the spacing, the timing of their children, to have information to do so, and have the right to attain the highest standard of sexual reproductive health. These also include the rights of all to make decisions concerning reproduction free of discrimination and coercion. It is important at this juncture to consider rights that are being infringed on by our abortion laws. Next, we're asking that the Parliament consider all Jamaican women, and of course those most vulnerable. Who is most vulnerable is the girl who says to me, I do not want this baby, but I do not want to go to jail. I do not want my father's child inside of me. I want to die. We also call on this group to consider implementing equitable legal, medical, social protections in an environment so that safe abortions can take place. Safe abortion should not only be for those who are willing to access a nice, good doctor who will take the chance and have the equipment or the social standing to do it. Safe abortion should not only be for those who can afford the cost, often sourced from family members or friends, or even the perpetrators themselves. Safe abortion should not only be for those whose network keep their secret. Finally, we call on this joint committee to recognize that pro-life arguments presented are really pro-pregnancy arguments. I spoke to one pro-life activist who told me that the child can be put up for adoption and the state must take responsibility to provide social services. Before you get to adoption, what trauma does a survivor of rape or domestic violence have to go through before having to look at the fetus? We're asking our child protection agencies to take on more burden that we already know we are not yet prepared to deal with. The economic and mental burden of the woman who is raped, of the girl who is living with HIV and have complications of having to deal with a child. These are factors that we must take in place. And while we know that not every woman falls in this category, we have a large percentage of our Jamaican girls who do. In conclusion, they have said to me, and I say to you, who feels it knows it, Lord? Who feels it knows it? We would like to choose our children. We would like to choose at least the outcome of incest, rape, and sexual violence. We ask the committee to allow us to at least choose our options. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you very much for observing the timing. Are there any questions? Mr. Stewart, Mrs. Cuthbert-Flynn? Very clear. And we have had the opportunity of seeing the document that was presented beforehand, and that's the case in most of the submissions. So may I thank you very much for that presentation and assure you that all that you have said and all that you have written will form part of our consideration. Ms. Rose, you are next in line. Are do you represent any group or are you on your own?
I'm Ms. Rose.
Yeah? Ms. Rose,
Yes.
Thank you. Good. It's same consideration of time, if you please.
What's the time, please, sir?
Yes.
15 minutes. All right. Thank you, MP
Thank you.
Thwaites. My presentation here is not to bring a rights-based approach to this issue, but looking at the impact of abortion on demography, and the consequential impact on our economic and social development over the long term. As you are aware, Jamaica's population has not been growing significantly over the past decade or two, with us having population growth rates of less than 0.5%. Interestingly, the population has not grown by 100% in the last 15 years, and by 100,000 people cumulatively in the last 15 years. From 2004 to 2018, it has been 84,000 people according to Economic and Social Survey of Jamaica 2018. We also are aware that our birth rates are relatively in the 2-point range, and so we don't have a great growth rate. Our migration in terms of immigration has been over 20,000 per year over the last 15 or so years, and so that is a part of the demographic context. We have to look at, in terms of our demography, how it plays out on the various economic variables in society, in terms of our commitments now as a country, with a growth rate of 0%, and PIJ looking at the fact that we're on the decline in terms of the growth rate of the country, population growth rate. We're going to head to that pretty soon. How will it impact on the economic investments and the debt and the expenditure that we are undertaking now in terms of introducing abortion wholesale-wise, not taking into consideration the special considerations which will be mentioned by E for Life. How would that impact on the economic variables? We are taking a lot of loans. GDP as a percentage of debt as a percent of GDP is 93%, around that. In terms of, and we know that debt is long term. If they have the population growing at a lower rate or less people in the population, how will that affect our debt repayment? In terms of the labor force, we already know that there are issues with the quality of skilled labor force one of the causes being the high migration, but in terms of what are the impact on the labor force in terms of a drastic reduction in the population. Also our social security systems, NIS, you know that it takes people to have a sustainable national insurance, and we know that we have a limited pension coverage around 10%. So what is the impact of us losing our population before they come out? What is the impact on that? We have the budget, and we know that tax collection is essential to the budget. And again, how are we factoring into these variables into our decision making as a country? We are a small island developing state, and so already we are small and we are vulnerable to certain shocks, economic and environmental, etc. And so in terms of a drastic reduction in our replacement population, I think it has to be considered as a very important factor in terms of our sustainability to function as a country. Or we'll be looking to have immigration of other labor to fit into the population if there becomes a void. And will Jamaica cease to be Jamaica or look something look other than what we look now? I think it's very important for us to consider and model any impact of abortion on these and other economic and social variables and see where we are as a population given the projection for current population trends. I'm not a demographer, but when you look at it and you look at how we're going to sustain ourselves, having invested so much in the country in terms of national debt and other things, we have to consider that, and I'd like for that to be modeled properly in terms of our demography and looking at the impact of a decline in population with abortion. If it is introduced, what will it look like and what will our economic variables look like and social variables? This is very important. It might seem trivial now, but 50 years down the line, we might find ourselves in an adverse position and not being able to reverse the decisions of today. My presentation went into, the other side of the discussion in terms of options for abortion, but I think what I wanted to present was really the impact of the potential impact of abortion on our economic variables. We have, we have to look at these things in detail, and I think we need to, get those studies done and really have the facts presented to the public in a very cohesive manner so that, we are aware that when we take a decision now, just like environment and styrofoam ban, we know what the impact is on the environment, but we knew it after where we are using styrofoam and plastic bags over a protracted period of time. Similarly, we need to have that information in front of us and those studies done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rose. I have a question, but Mrs. Cuthbert-Flynn, sure, please go ahead. Ms. Rose, thank you for your presentation. It would be good if we had any comparative knowledge of societies which have liberalized the law in relation to abortion as to whether there was a correlation between that fact and a decline or any movement in population which could be connected. I wondered if you could help us, or if not, no, if you ever research this, you could provide us with help.
But as I said, I'm not a demographer, but I know that the countries that have liberalized abortion are first world countries mainly. And so to compare first world country with Jamaica is comparing a breadfruit with an ackee, so, or a tomato. One is a tree crop, one is a short-term crop. So it would be very hard for us to, I think, look at both of them in the same context, because the resources that are available to a first world country certainly are not available to us, and the population size, etc. We appreciate that we're a small island developing state. So, that is my first reaction to that, but I think it would be useful for that research to be done. As I said, I'm not that type of researcher, but I think that type of research would be useful. We know certainly for countries like Canada, and so they have experienced a drop in their population, and we see the massive amounts of immigration, even from Jamaica to Canada and to other countries. So I am not an expert on it, as I said, but we have to compare like with like. So we'd have to get a small island developing state with similar characteristics as Jamaica to really delve into that issue a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Cuthbert-Flynn?
Yes, if I may. You're aware that there are many countries where the birth rate, people, the 2030 vision, there are a lot of people who are not going to reach that really, because I think women, we're now empowered, I believe is the word. We're not staying at home like our grandmother and my great-grandmother did. My great-grandmother had 9 children and she stayed home. My grandmother had 9 children and she stayed home to work. I think women, I have 2 children because are delaying. We're more empowered, where more of us are in parliament, and we're delaying to have children because we now have a choice. And I think that is the operative word. We now have a choice not to sit at home and have 6 and 7 children, but we're now choosing to say to our husbands or boyfriend that we only want 2 because that's what we can afford. Who are the people that you're talking about, as far as who are these women that you'd want to see have more children?
Thanks.
And just a follow-up, you can answer those both. And and are you saying women should have children no matter what the circumstance? Even if they're poor, they can't afford it, just to fulfill some thing that we're trying to get to because we're getting older, that women, no matter what, you should just go ahead and have kids.
Okay, thanks, MP Cuthbert. Well, as you preluded your discussion to say how many children your grandmother had, my maternal great-grandmother had 2 children. My grandmother had 3. My mother had 2. I have 1. My brother has 0. And when I look at my colleagues, most people only have 1 and 2, and me having 1 at 31 years old. Well, I'm not. Well, I'm divorced, so I can't. My status restricts me from having another one outside of wedlock. By my Christian principles, I would have 2 optimally. That is my goal. I have many persons around me, and as I sit in the boardroom with some persons, and I take a canvas, most people just have 1 or 2. I want to clarify something that you said. You said, who are these women that I'm asking to have children? I did not say that. I said that we should aim to model any impact of abortion on key economic variables in our population so that we know how to make decisions now for later. For example, if we're putting in infrastructure and we're paying back the loan, I assume my grandchildren will be paying back the loan and other things. And we know that loans are long-term. If we have a serious decline in our population, does it become viable for us to take some of the decisions that we are taking today? Maybe not. And so we have to look at that. And if we don't, if we're not in a position to develop at the rate because we have a population decline, those are some things that we'll need to be looking at now. It is for decision making. I'm not asking women to be breeding machines because certainly I'm not, and have 1 or 2 children. The third one, most people will say is a drop-in, right? As we know it. But most people I know don't have 3 children. They have 1 or 2. So I'm saying that in terms of looking at our population policies and plans, we have to be planning now for what is to happen later if we get a drastic population drop. Should we be taking the investment decisions and the loan decisions that we are taking now? Should be reducing our expectations of the future now? You understand? So it's that we need to have a holistic model to determine what policies or legislation is undertaking, and not from one perspective. It has to be holistic, as is any policy process in this country.
I think we accept that point and understand it fully. It's a broader issue than this, but certainly one for our thought. Any other questions?
Mr. Rose, through the chairman, I particularly like your presentation. We are now getting a different spin on the whole thing. It's true that we have an aging population. We note what transpires in Canada, but would it be possible for us to get some data as it relates to that aspect there? It would really enhance the discussions some more.
I think it's a subject. Ms. Rose has indicated the limitations of our own research, but she has raised an issue which I think we can inquire into, and surely we can find comparable instances to take into account. Thank you very much. The Partnership for Women's Health and Well-Being. Mrs. French, thank you. Would you turn on the microphone for me, please?
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks. Yes, it's my second time making a presentation here, so those of you MPs, members of the committee, know that I am the voluntary coordinator of the Partnership for Women's Health and Wellness, and took the opportunity of the extended deadline to make this additional submission. The submission focuses on Christian views regarding abortion. But in order to, and the reason we are focusing on that is because a lot of the anti-choice presentations in this chamber have given as their framework and foundation a view of Christian morality. But before I go into that, I just made a summary of the main points of the pro-choice presentations which have been made in the Parliament. So far, I'm not going to really focus much on them, but I think it might be useful to those members who have not been able to attend the committee or not been able to read all the presentations. So there is a whole list on the first two slides of the pro-choice main points. I don't think I have to read all of them, but just to check a few, the moral and scientific acceptability of abortion choice where fetuses have not gone beyond 12 weeks of pregnancy. Some of the one point made. The anachronism of the current 1864 colonial law criminalizing abortion in the conditions of an independent Jamaica whose parliament still maintains this law at this time, 2019-2020 that should be. The association between the 1864 colonial law and colonial attempts to keep women breeding to sustain the former slave plantation workforce against their will in the period after formal emancipation, the link between violence against women, patriarchal culture, and the conditions which lead women to choose abortion, to which Eve for Life has spoken eloquently. The limits placed on women's control of fertility by the pervasive culture of violence against women, and it's a longer point which I won't go into. The gendered structure of the economy and the culture of work, which predominantly assigns to women, mainly mothers, the unpaid and little supported labor of the everyday care of children, the age, thus limiting their choices or making them extremely burdensome and costly to pursue. If you have children and you're dependent and you're also looking after a sick mother or other sick people in the place, having an additional child can be a major issue in terms of just survival. The particular vulnerabilities of girls and young women as they seek to manage their reproductive lives in a society where realistic, practical, and scientific information about sex and sexuality is hardly available. And the fact that poor women and girls suffer most from the existence of the punitive abortion law and lack access to safe, legal, and affordable services. The absolute freedom of women not to access safe abortion services. Women must be free to choose to have or not to have an abortion according to their own conscience and assessment of their situation. The sacrifices involved, education, jobs, life goals. The reminder that only women get pregnant and that it is women's lives that are unavoidably affected should they be forced to accept an unwanted pregnancy. And the right for women like men to for themselves about their reproduction and to be able to do so without risking their lives and without the threat of imprisonment. And below that is a list of the pro-choice presentations, not necessarily the titles, but just key points, which any parliamentarian who has not by the advisory committee to the Parliamentary Select Committee of 2007 to 2009. And I don't know, Ms. Brandon, sorry, I don't know if the chair was privy to the newspaper article that I handed out, which if you would be so kind as to ensure that he has a copy of that, which looks at the reasons why these Christians support the idea of choice. We recognize that terminating a pregnancy is never an easy decision, but we hold out the compassion of Christ to all women faced with this decision. The Creator has given us all the ability to collectively understand the laws of science as we continue to explore and appreciate the marvelous world of God's creation. No branch of knowledge works more in teams than science across all political barriers. We unwittingly insult God when we do not use His amazing knowledge to further our understanding of life. The assertion that a human being is created at conception and infused with a soul is not supported by science. Many zygotes never get implanted in the womb but are passed out in menses. Many others are spontaneously aborted even after implantation. When John leaped in Elizabeth's womb, she was in the 6th month of pregnancy. The fetus up to 12 weeks cannot be viewed as a human person that develops later and emerges as circumstances where they may be cruelly beaten, where their incipient self-esteem can be crushed through daily cursing, or to be among those sent to children's homes, some tragically with abusive conditions. The fact that some survive such situations cannot remove the fact that many do not, and sink at times into drug addiction, mental illness, or a life of crime. The tragedy of our world forces too many women and girls into situations in which they conceive in ignorance or through force. There are many examples of when a child may not be wanted for good reason at a particular time. That was a cross-section of people from different faiths. But I am putting particular emphasis here on Roman Catholics because we know that, well, I'll come to it later. A statement for Catholics for Choice was sent to the chair of this committee in April 2019. And that statement makes the following key points. Catholic teaching regards the well-formed conscience as the final arbiter in moral decisions. Moral decisions can only be made in an atmosphere free of coercion, whether that coercion is physical or legal. The Roman Catholic Church hierarchy has now rejected the ancient notion that a fetus is a fully formed person. In the 1974 Declaration on Procured Abortion, the Vatican acknowledged that it does not know when the fetus becomes a person. There is not a unanimous, and I quote, "There is not a unanimous tradition on this point, and authors are as yet in disagreement." This disagreement has a long history. Neither St. Augustine nor St. Thomas Aquinas considered the fetus in the early stages of pregnancy to be a person. So the debate goes that far back, and the disagreement goes that far back. Respect for life, says the statement, should include respect for women's lives, and the sanctity of life includes women's life. The statement further makes the point that the teaching on abortion is not infallible, and Catholics have the right to dissent from infallible church teachings. Catholics also have abortions. In the USA, 24% of women having abortions are Catholic, and I put the source there. Rank and file Catholics ignore teachings on abortion in the same way they ignore teachings on contraception. They take responsibility for their own moral decisions. The statement ends. Choice, Catholics for Choice to do the same, and that comes from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which states a human being must always obey the certain judgment of his conscience. Doesn't, I guess that means her too, right? And they state this is particularly significant in cases where one's religion's position is far apart from many others, as is the case of the Catholic Church's positions on sexuality and reproductive health, where the Catholic Church's views are more conservative than any other major world religion. For example, the complete ban on artificial contraception, even for married couples, has been rejected by all other major faith groups. Catholic teaching, says the statement, supports pluralism, and we move on a little bit from the issue of sexuality to the matter of church and state. Catholic teaching supports pluralism and the separation of church and state. The political community and the church are autonomous and independent of each other in their own fields. Now, since we are talking about the church, it is important to also put the position of another version of what the church says. I've been present at every single hearing on this motion in this chamber and extrapolate from it that the position of the anti-choice church is the following. Abortion at any stage in the process is killing a human being. It should not be allowed under any circumstances. Even contraception is not acceptable, and the state's framework is, and I quote, a Judeo-Christian morality. In this parliamentary chamber, as part of those proposals, we have had to listen to a young nun reporting with pride on a 12-year-old incest victim refused help for abortion and instead, quote, persuaded to become, quote, a loving mother. This is a crime. To make it worse, it was said that the perpetrator of this violence, quote, could help by supporting the child. He should be imprisoned. This church approach supports violence to girl children. Christianity versus the, I'm not even going on, sorry. Thank you. Christianity versus the anti-choice church.
Mrs. French, your time has expired, so would you wind up as soon as you can?
Okay, can I get 5 more minutes? No, okay, 2 more. All right, so there's church violence parading as charity. Christianity versus the anti-choice church. We look at Christ, because Christianity, I assume, is associated with the gospel of Christ, who himself was revolutionary in terms of religion in the sense that he brought a new message to change the Old Testament kind of thing. It says, in the case of Christ defended women against the law of the Pharisees. In the case of the woman condemned to be stoned for adultery, he challenged, he that is without blame cast the first stone, calling out their hypocrisy and dishonesty. The Christ of the New Testament was compassionate and understanding to women and opposed laws that were not. Christians follow Christ when they support women against injustice and hypocrisy. True Christians work to decriminalize abortion and save women's lives. And then we speak to the role of a parliament in a plural democracy. And I have handed out a correction to the quotation from JFK, who was the first Catholic to run as president in the United States, who was very clear on the separation of church and state, and the quotation is there. We exhort the members of committee not to allow their personal faith, beliefs, or values to display their central focus on ending the mysteries of unsafe abortion. To the extent that they bend under the pressure to religious bodies, to that extent they are abandoning their role as servants of the broader public interest. Parliamentarians who oppose choice for fear of losing votes from a church-going electorate are hiding behind the church to avoid doing their duty as parliamentarians. We hold Parliament accountable. We recognize that there is a link between Roman Catholic leadership on the anti-choice issue outside of the Parliament and linkages and echoes. And that is why we have called on all parliamentarians to take a position in favor of doing the right thing for women. And so we have distributed to every single member of parliament in the Senate and in the lower house a call which puts forward the whole summarize what the motion is, what the pro-choice and the anti-choice positions are, and why we are asking the parliament to decriminalize, and we have done the history of it, because it's 44 years now since we first had an attempt in the political directorate to change this law and to do away with at least some of the pain and trauma that women are going through because of it. And 44 years and we still haven't done it. So we are saying decriminalize abortion and make it safe and accessible to all who need it. The time is now. Equal attention by the parliament to the life, health and rights of Jamaican women is overdue. Please, all parliamentarians, read your call. It summarizes everything. It's a brief way of getting an overview. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the statement by the Partnership for Women's Health and Well-being. Are there any questions? Thank you. Mrs. Ofodile, you are our fourth presenter, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. MPs, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm here to represent myself. There are so many reasons why, personally, I am against the very thought of legalizing abortion. But I will just list and expound a bit on a few that I have researched and have proven to be true based on experiences of some persons I know and or know of personally. I understand and sympathize with women who have been raped and persons who have health complications. However, because I believe in one that is in control of everything, both good and bad, the decision to do something that will not necessarily fix the problem at hand should be left up to him and not another human being or just a possibility. God is in control of our lives, whether we believe in him or not. Whether we call him God or something else. And so since, try as you may, we cannot reverse a rape and or fix a health condition perfectly, we should then leave these situations to the only power that can deal with them perfectly. Just as we have to believe and trust in the same power to give us a healthy baby with, as we say, 10 fingers and 10 toes, we should leave everything else up to him. He knows all things, he knows the ultimate outcome, and he knew there would have been a rape or a health complication before it happened. He also knows the result. Let him handle his business. If he sees fit, he will terminate the pregnancy his way. Let God be God. There are some risk factors associated with abortion that I researched. There are immediate risk. I'm just giving a few. There are several others, but I'm giving a few. There is cut or torn cervix. This means the opening of the uterus may be torn because the abortionist must stretch it open to allow medical instruments to pass into the uterus during surgical abortion procedures. There is puncture or tear wall of the uterus. A medical instrument can cut through the wall of the uterus during a suction abortion. Perforation can lead to infection, heavy bleeding, or both, depending on the severity of the cut. Surgery may be required to repair the uterine tissue, and in serious cases, a hysterectomy, which is the surgical removal of the uterus, may be required. anesthesia-related complications. As with other surgical procedures, anesthesia increases the risk of complications associated with abortion. Due to these risks, many surgical abortion procedures are completed without the benefit of anesthesia, which can entail a great deal of physical pain to the woman. There are risks for future pregnancies, vaginal bleeding during early pregnancy, placenta problems such as retained placenta, and incompetent cervix, which poses major risk for future pregnancies, particularly during the second trimester, which includes premature birth, pregnancy loss. In such cases, surgery might be needed to repair the damage before a woman can conceive another child. A weakened or damaged cervix, which can lead to the potential for the cervix to open prematurely in a subsequent pregnancy. This is more likely to affect women who have had multiple surgical abortions. And there are researches that I have read also that more times than not, persons who have done one abortion does more than one, does several afterwards. There are emotional effects. Because every person is different, one woman's reaction to abortion will certainly be different from another's at a spiritual, emotional, psychological, or physical level. These impacts can vary over time, depending on the mental health of the post-abortive person. After an abortion, a woman may have both positive and negative feelings regarding her choice, even at the same time. It's typical to feel instant relief due to the fact that the procedure is over and that she's no longer in an unplanned pregnancy. However, after a few months, this relief can be replaced with many other emotional reactions. One woman may feel sad that she was in a position where all of her choices were difficult ones. She may feel emotionally sad about ending her pregnancy. She may also experience a sense of emptiness or guilt, wondering whether or not her decision was correct. An acute feeling of grief, this is the early response to loss that can be intense and all-encompassing. It can involve intense daily yearning to be reunited with the lost loved one, significant emotional pain, as well as a multitude of physical reactions that many have never felt before. Frequently distracting thoughts of the deceased, trouble focusing attention, and forgetfulness. Other emotional effects: depression, anger, fear of disclosure, preoccupation with babies or getting pregnant again, nightmares, anniversary syndrome, flashbacks of the abortion procedure, sexual dysfunction, termination of relationships, emotional coldness, increased alcohol and drug abuse, eating disorders, repeat abortions, and suicide. Now I'm going to share two cases personal to me of persons that it was recommended to them to have an abortion. The first one was is my mother. At 2 months pregnant, she was out one evening and she started bleeding. She was rushed to her doctor. After attending to the situation at hand, she and my dad were invited to a meeting to discuss the way forward as it relates to the pregnancy. The doctor told them that because she had lost so much blood, and she was pregnant with her first child, that's my eldest brother. Because she had lost so much blood, if she keeps the pregnancy, there is a strong possibility that the child would be born retarded mentally or physically, or both. My parents, because of their beliefs, decided to trust in the one they believe in, kept the pregnancy to full term, and delivered a healthy, bouncing baby boy who has done nothing but made them proud to this day. No retardation of any sort. In fact, he has done excellently academically and otherwise. My other case is the wife of this sibling, my brother. At 5 months pregnant with her first child, which incidentally turned out to be her only child, she had some complications as well, and her doctor suggested that she take an abortion because if she didn't, the child would be born with Down syndrome, or she would have other mental or physical retardation. My sister-in-law and my brother decided to keep the pregnancy to full term. They kept and delivered a vivacious, pleasant bundle of joy, my niece. To know her is to love her. Not only has she brought joy to the family, but she continues to make us proud. She has been on the honor roll, performing way above her level from she started school. An absolute blessing, which all children are. I want to ask a question. It's sort of a rhetorical question because I don't know how many persons here will answer. But it might sound weird, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just for thought. Which person here, if you knew your child, you were pregnant, your child would become the next doctor or scientist with the cure for cancer or any other terminal disease, or the next world champion, the next multi-billionaire, the next Miss World, would terminate that pregnancy? And if I may add, even if this conception took place in a bad situation, think about it. Would you? Okay, so you can think about it, because I know that persons will say, okay, but we don't know. Just the same, we don't know if somebody has been raped, and it is sad. It's a horrible situation for somebody to be raped, right? But we don't know what that child, if that person, because of the rape, that person becomes pregnant, we don't know what that child would become. Not even the person that is pregnant knows what that child will become. They only know how they are feeling at that time. In conclusion, based on reasons previously explored and also my own spiritual conviction and belief, but most of all, my passion and love for children and the well-being of us women, I ask that the very thought of even considering to legalize this act be totally abolished. Many have already done abortion, but what's done is done, and we continue to support prayerfully if needed. However, let us turn a new page and make a decision to embrace life. Let us teach our girls or women to value themselves, their bodies, and also teach our men and boys to love, respect, and value our women and girls. This way, we will have less unplanned pregnancies and fewer incidents of carnal abuse. And I took this from our health minister: love your body, treat your body right. Abortion and its repercussions, way too much damage to the body, in my opinion. There are also many women like myself who never had a child and loves children very much. And I mean, I have to leave that up to the one who knows all things, right? I have checked, my doctors have checked me, my doctors have checked my husband, and we're both fine, but only God knows why I'm not pregnant as yet. So, however, We,
If there is any disturbance, the gallery will be cleared. We show respect for all views here. Mrs. Ofedili, your time is expiring, so would you wind up now, please?
okay, I'm winding up, sir. However, as I was saying, we, that's me, women like me, we are willing and able to love and care for these unborn children. Give us that opportunity, give us that option. We are a powerful, gifted, and talented people, a powerful nation with a rich heritage that we want to live on for a very long time. Every unborn child is a potential leader, a potential game changer. You never know who you are about to or will destroy in an abortion. Let God be God. If the pregnancy is to be terminated for whatever reason, let him do it his way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ofedili. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Ms. Ofedili. Nice name, I like it. I like that name. Just that, you know, thank you for your presentation. It is unfortunate, however, that the doctor at 5 months, the fact that her life was not in danger, I'm surprised that the doctor would advise or recommend. Because Down syndrome, there are a lot of children who have Down syndrome. Down syndrome is a test that you can actually take.
Yes.
They give you that test when you're pregnant at a certain stage in your pregnancy. And I don't think a lot of women abort their children because of that. I don't think that is, you know, I don't think a lot of women do. They still have these babies who are, you know, members of society and, you know, productive members of society. So it is unfortunate that that doctor, not the fact that the mother's life was not, that's not in danger. So I'm shocked that that would be something that a medical doctor would actually advise someone
And that is
to do.
overseas. That's not here.
So that's
was
unfortunate that would have taken place. I mean, that's really all I have to say. I'm really shocked because I think between about 4 months or so, they do offer you this test to take to see if the child have Down syndrome or not, so you are mentally prepared. But I'm glad the baby or the child is okay.
And if I may add, based on your point,
Very briefly.
this is why I'm saying we cannot legalize this thing, because in a case like this, it would just be so easy for persons to just decide, okay, this lady is 5 months pregnant, her life is not in danger, but the doctor says abortion. And because it's legal, she would just say, okay, let's go ahead and do it. Even though it would not necessarily be something that he needed to do.
Thank you very much for that. I would like to thank the 4 presenters who have honored the committee by their thoughts today, and to assure you once again that all of your views, written and verbal, will be taken into account. I thank the observers who have come, and we treat everyone here, members of the committee, as well as all those other present, with consummate respect and with a listening ear to their views. The public session of the committee will come to an end now. There needs to be a meeting of the members who are present to deal with another matter and also to deal with some procedural issues pertaining to this resolution. We have had over 40 submissions in the extended period that has been that was given, and we will determine how these are to be handled, and the public will be advised. Once again, thank you very much. Yes? Yes. Yes. when we decide, we will let the public know. Thank you very much.
Cool and me calm, stepping on the place like a lightning storm. They up on the rhythm and a ring the alarm, so them coulda never try take the king for your man. Touch the stage anytime me perform, then best believe everything me go on. Then tell Babylon keep cool and keep calm before them end up run up in a lightning storm. Forward a fi run when the general.
I me say PBCJ we cool and we calm. Step up in a so like a lightning storm. They up on the rhythm and a ring the alarm. Say them coulda never try take the king fin up on. In the studio, we a perform. Best believe everything we govern. Say go tell Babylon, keep cool and keep calm before them go run up in a lightning storm. 5 stars say that, Rastafari.
Touch the stage anytime me perform, then best believe